The fact is, in this current political climate, if immigration reform is going to pass, it will require compromise. My name is William Kovatch, and I am a trained immigration lawyer. I've often been disappointed in the way immigration issues are talked about in the media, although it's not always their fault. Immigration law can be a very complex subject, touching upon constitutional issues as well as personal political points of view. My goal is to explain immigration law to you, concentrating on looking at judicial opinions and executive actions in order to explain how immigration law can have an impact on our community and on our country. I hope that you'll join me as we try to make sense of immigration law and how it may affect the average person. We have political realities that we have to deal with, and those political realities are going to make it difficult to get everything that Joe Biden wants. Now, to begin with, it is true that the Democrats hold the House of Representatives by a very comfortable majority. In the 2020 elections, the Democrats did lose seats, but they still have enough of a majority that Speaker Nancy Pelosi will be able to push through whatever agenda the Democratic Party wants without much of an issue. The Republicans in the House of Representatives, well, they can hem and haw, they can make a dog and pony show of a number of issues, but in the end, they're really powerless to do anything to stop it. The same is not true for the Senate. To begin with, the Democrats only control the Senate by virtue of the fact that there's a Democrat in the White House. The Senate is split 50-50. There are 50 Democrats and 50 Republicans. To be more precise, there are 50 senators who caucus as Democrats and 50 senators who caucus as Republicans. Bernie Sanders, for example, is technically an independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats, and the Democrats rely on his vote in order to get anything passed. But more importantly, this means that the Democrats are going to rely on having the vice president cast the tie-breaking vote. And currently, because Joe Biden and Kamala Harris won the presidential election, Kamala Harris, a Democrat, is the vice president of the United States. Her main constitutional power is to cast tie-breaking votes in the Senate. But to even get to a tie-breaking vote in the Senate, you're going to need a 50-50 vote. And the fact is, you have a number of Democratic senators who may not necessarily toe the line on every issue. Joe Manchin, for example, is the Democratic senator who represents West Virginia. West Virginia is a notoriously conservative state. If Joe Manchin wants to be able to keep his job, if he wants to be reelected, he's going to have to be mindful of the fact that most of his constituents are conservative. And that's going to be one issue that's going to keep the Democratic Party grounded. The same is true with respect to the Democratic senators from Arizona. Sure, Arizona voted to have 2 Democratic senators. That is a historic event. But that doesn't necessarily mean that Arizona has suddenly become a bastion of liberalism. Senators Mark Kelly and Kyrsten Sinema are going to have to keep in mind that a good number of their constituents are still conservatives. And this means they're not always going to align with what the Democratic Party wants. And those are just the problems in reaching a simple majority. The next problem is that the Senate doesn't operate based on majority rule. And that's due to a rule called Cloture. In order for a bill to come up for a vote, 60 senators must agree to end debate. If you don't get 60 senators to agree to end the debate, well, the debate could go on and on and on for infinity. This is called the filibuster. So unless the Democrats can somehow convince 10 Republicans to vote to cut off debate, they're not going to be able to get legislation voted on in the floor of the Senate. And so that's going to make getting immigration reform passed difficult, even if the Democrats technically hold a majority in the House of Representatives and the Senate. If the Democrats are going to pass a pathway to citizenship, they will need to compromise. So what are some of the issues that are pet conservative issues with regard to immigration law? Well, first and foremost, border security. Currently, there's not much in the Biden proposal to address border security. If immigration reform is going to pass, the Democrats are going to need to address border security. They're going to need to include some provisions that address greater border security, whether that's hiring new border guards or putting more money towards border security. That's probably open for negotiation, but they're not going to pass it without addressing border security. Next, the Biden proposal talks about clearing out the backlogs with respect to both family immigration and employment immigration. Now, first of all, the backlogs exist because of how immigration law operates. The backlogs aren't there arbitrarily. The backlogs exist because there are annual quotas that are distributed based on the types of visas that are available, as well as the areas of the world that tend to send us the most immigrants. Because U.S. immigration law tries to even out where immigrants come from, well, the countries that send us the most immigrants tend to have the longest waiting period. China, India, the Philippines, Mexico, nationals from those countries are more likely to wait longer for their visa to become available. And the thing is, to address these backlogs, you can't just say issue more visas. You actually have to address structurally how the law operates. You have to address the preference system. And then you add to that mix the fact that the conservatives now have a new pet immigration issue. They call it chain migration. Chain migration is just the label that the Republicans use as a scare tactic. It's essentially a way to explain how family immigration works. However, when the Republicans talk about it, they exaggerate it in order to create the impression that U.S. immigration law operates to allow a bunch of undesirables to come into the country by virtue of the fact that they're related to somebody who's already here. In reality, immigration law doesn't exactly work that way. It's far more complicated, and it would take longer than this video to explain it all. But if you're going to address the backlog with respect to family-based visas, then you need to either address or recognize that there's going to be resistance from conservative circles where they're going to throw around these loaded terms like chain migration. The Republicans also hate the diversity visa. Eliminating the diversity visa has been on their agenda for almost a decade now. Now, their desire to eliminate the diversity visa is based on a misunderstanding of exactly what the diversity visa is. You often heard President Trump out on the campaign trail in his rallies misrepresenting what the diversity visa is all about. Nonetheless, if you go back to the 2013 proposal for immigration reform, what you'll see is that the Republicans wanted to eliminate the diversity visa program altogether and replace it with more of a points-based system. The points-based system is something similar to what you find in Canada. Under a points-based system, certain aspects, certain characteristics gives you points. Those characteristics are deemed to be desirable for the host country. It could be education. It could be family ties. It could be some special skill that you have. But then, by adding up those points, it determines how likely you are to get a visa and how soon. Republicans have been fighting for a points-based system for years. Whether or not it's going to pass, well, it would take a major overhaul of exactly how U.S. immigration works now, but it's still something to keep in mind. Currently, the proposal does throw a few bones in the Republicans' direction. Those are things like tightening the ability of U.S. companies to displace American workers by hiring cheap foreign labor. Currently, Biden's proposal involves having the Departments of Homeland Security and Labor make recommendations on how to address the potential for the exploitation of workers. There are also portions of the proposal that deal with smart border technology, that is, enhancing the security of the border by use of certain technology. But again, the specifics of exactly what this involves, well, it's not there yet. Now, there are also issues with this proposal that cut the other way. For example, the proposal is not at all clear on how it's going to treat the so-called Dreamers. The DREAM Act, or the Development, Relief, and Education for Alien Minors Act, derives from a legislative proposal to deal with all of those undocumented aliens who were brought here as children without any input of their own. They have grown up in the United States believing this is their home country, and indeed it's as much their home as any other citizen who is born here. Currently, relief for these people is addressed solely through the DACA program, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. But there's a problem with continuing to rely on DACA. You see, DACA is bad policy. It's bad policy because it's just executive action. All DACA is a promise that the administration is not going to try to deport a person. And there are provisions in the law that say that when the president has given deferred action, he also can give legal work authorization. But DACA, deferred action, does not create legal status. So the millions of people who are present currently utilizing the DACA program, they're still not legally present. They still have no legal immigration status. Currently, DACA recipients have no path to citizenship. And the proposal is not at all clear on what the requirements will be for people who currently qualify for DACA to get on that pathway to citizenship. The point merely being that President Biden's proposal is a remarkable first step. But that's all it is. It's a first step in a process that's going to involve negotiation and compromise. This is not what the final bill is going to look like. What is that final bill going to look like? Well, let's be honest, at this point, that's anyone's guess. And whether immigration reform can even pass Congress, given the makeup of the Senate, that's still in doubt. Watch how the negotiations evolve in Congress, and in particular, look to the Senate. Look at those 3 senators that I identified. How are the negotiations going to proceed in the Senate? So I will continue to try to give you updates as I see the negotiations progress in the Senate. And until then, thank you very much for watching. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. If there are any topics you would like me to address in the future, please let me know in the comments below. Now, I don't like talking about this, but I am currently disabled because of complications following cancer surgery. If you're feeling generous, I'll have a link to my PayPal account in the description below. Thank you.